Hello, everyone, and welcome to the free preview of the No BS course on freelance writing. My name is Jacob Jans. I'm the co-founder of Writing Launch. Today, you're going to learn how to find high-paying writing clients, how to set up your portfolio so that you can win the best clients, and how to present your unique value as a writer, all so that you can build a sustainable income as a freelance writer. I know many of you are creative writers as well. Personally, I'm a poet, and I love to write poetry. It's something I'm very passionate about. And I imagine many of you are here today because you also love to write. And that's a wonderful thing. Our goal today is to help you turn that passion, that love for writing, into an income. Now, we're not covering how to get paid for your creative writing. We're going to be talking about how to get paid for to write for businesses, blogs, magazines, newspapers, etc. All of these things, this type of writing is creative, but it's not poetry or fiction or novel writing. So Ian Chandler, our instructor today, he is a freelance writer. He is the author of the No BS Guide to Freelance Writing. He is the instructor of the full 6-week course, the No BS course on freelance writing, and he's a full-time freelance writer. He's helped hundreds of writers launch their freelance writing career. He knows what he's doing, so pay attention to what Ian has to say today. He's a great instructor. He's put together a great presentation. We're going to be learning a lot of information, so pay attention to Ian. And here he is. Here is Ian Chandler.
Thank you, Jacob. So hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm glad you could be here, whether you're watching it live or recorded. Like Jacob said, we're going to be talking a lot about how to turn a love for writing into a sustainable income. I also come from a creative writing background. That's really how I got started in writing. And while I don't do that anymore, it definitely helped me get into freelance writing, and I've been able to use those skills a lot in my day-to-day career. So what we're going to be talking about today is a sustainable system that you can use repeatably to get great results, to get paid for your writing, and to get published on tons of blogs and write for tons of people and companies and whoever needs it, and be able to sell yourself as a writer. We're going to be going over everything that you need to learn to make that happen. And we have a great presentation for you today. At the end, we're going to have a Q&A session. So if you have any questions, make sure to type them in the Facebook comments, or you can email them to us. And if we don't get to them during the webinar, we'll do our best to get to them after the webinar and email or comment you back. So I hope you enjoy the presentation today.
Yeah, just as Ian sets up the slides, I just wanted to say, if you have any questions, I'll be scanning the comments and looking through and collecting the questions that you come up with. So at the end of the session, we can get to as many of the questions as we have. So pay attention, think of what you might want, what details you might want filled in, and then we'll get to them at the end of Ian's presentation. And here's Ian again.
All right, so today is going to be a free preview of our main course, the No BS course on freelance writing. This is what most of our new members go through right away, and it's sort of the building blocks of a freelance writing career. And as the name implies, there's no BS, there's no fluff. This is just a bunch of stuff that works, and the reason I know that is because it's all stuff that I use to get to where I am today. Today we'll be talking about a few different things. Of course, we're going to give you a sneak peek of the No BS course and tell you what it's about and give you a look at what we cover in it. And like I mentioned earlier, we're going to provide a step-by-step framework that you can use to get paid for your writing. And we will focus on freelance writing, not creative writing. So we're talking about, you know, getting published on blogs or in magazines, nonfiction, journalism, stuff more along those lines, and writing for companies and entrepreneurs, that sort of stuff. But as Jacob alluded to earlier, you'll definitely be able to use your creative writing skills to freelance write. First, I want to talk about getting started because it's often the hardest part in just about anything that you do. And there tend to be several big problems. There are 3 big questions that we get a lot, and you might be asking them right now. First one is, how can I get started if I have no experience or credentials? Now, this is a big one because most people, most writers who are starting out on the freelance writing path feel that they need a lot of experience or a lot of credentials, a nice title, something like that, that they can hang their hat on and show to clients. But we're going to talk about that a little later on and talk about how you really don't need any. A second question that we get a lot is, how do I get published and where do I look? We'll be covering that as well. And how do I build up a portfolio? And this sort of ties in with the first question. And we're going to get into all of these questions and answer them for you. So if you've been asking any of these questions, you're going to learn the answer today and learn how to take steps toward progressing in your freelance writing career. Let's cover this first question. How do you start without experience, credentials, or funds? And those are all, big things that a lot of people feel that they need. And I was in that boat when I started. I didn't have any credentials. I had no experience. I just jumped in really wet behind the ears, no experience at all. And what I learned from that is that you really only need 2 credentials, good writing and self-motivation. And if you have these, then you're qualified enough. Now, that may seem a little surprising, and you may be thinking, but don't I need a lot of experience? Don't I need a portfolio? You do, but to start out, you don't need anything, partially because the internet has made it so easy for anyone to get published. And that's sort of a blessing and a curse in some cases, but for you, it's really good news. And we'll go into how you can leverage that later on in the webinar. And you don't need a $20,000 degree or a fancy title because you really, like I said, you don't need any credentials to get started. Of course, you want to get experience as you progress, but right off the bat, you really don't need any. So if that's been preventing you from getting started, don't let it anymore. Start looking for work today, and we'll get into how to do that as well. But the point here is that don't let a lack of credentials or experience stop you from getting started, because you can become a successful writer with what you have right now, no matter where you are in life. That's the simple truth. It doesn't get any more complex than that. So next I want to talk about the one thing that clients and editors care most about, because this ties in directly with what we were just saying. You might think that if someone's paying you for writing, that they would care most about your experience, a resume that you can show, or some articles that you have online. But there's only one thing that stands out above the rest, head and shoulders, and that's that you'll get the job done well. Because when it comes down to it, and we're going to talk about this a little later on, providing writing is an exchange of value. It's a transaction. And when you think about it that way, it becomes a lot more simple. If you go out to a restaurant, of course you want to go somewhere that tastes good, but at the most basic level, you're trusting that they're going to do the job well and you're paying them for it. And that's the same thing with writing. And if you can focus on this and focus on your value, then you will be able to get jobs a lot easier than maybe before. And you'll certainly be a lot more competitive in terms of getting jobs while other writers don't. So this brings up another question, which is, well, how do you get those writing jobs with little or no experience? The answer is that, well, we just talked about, you have to communicate your value. We're going to go into this a little deeper, but I want you to start thinking about this now. And think about this question: how will I benefit this editor or this client? And think about that question for a minute, dwell on it. Focus on the value that you're going to provide. What is that? And we'll get to this a little later. So this webinar is going to be split up into 2 distinct sections. And it boils down to a question: do you want to get articles published, or do you want to work with clients? Because these are both very valid paths, both of them are, to a solid freelance writing career. I personally do both. I know many writers do. So whether you want to do one or both, we're going to cover that today. So first, let's talk about finding clients. When I say clients, I just mean, someone, either a company or an entrepreneur, usually an individual who needs work done for some sort of business endeavor. And we're going to come back to this idea of the unique value proposition. So this is kind of what we talked about earlier, and this is a pretty common business term, and you can Google it and research it, and I would highly recommend that. But it basically comes down to, what is the value that you bring? What is your unique value? Because if you don't have a unique value, nothing's really going to stick out about you. And if you're sitting there thinking, well, I don't really have any unique value, I'm just like any other writer providing writing, that's where you need to shift your mindset a little bit. And by shifting your mindset, you'll be able to be more approachable to clients and more appealing to clients. So when you're thinking about your value, you have to think, what am I doing? What value am I bringing? Because no one cares about your writing. That's the hard truth. They care about the end benefit they'll receive. So if you think about your value in terms of benefits, you'll be a lot more appealing to clients. So you have to think about don't think about, how can I really sell myself? Think about what benefit, what results am I going to bring to this client or this company? So this is something we cover on the very first day of the course, the idea of focusing on value as a freelance writer. So your unique value proposition is basically, like we said, your value statement. What value do you offer? What benefits do you offer? So that kind of breaks down into, what can you do for a client? What results can you deliver? And your UVP will guide how you do business, and it's sort of your mission statement, because it's going to underscore everything that you do, and it's going to emphasize to the client why they should choose you. And for that to happen, your clients need to clearly understand your UVP. So whatever that value is, you need to state it in plain language and make sure your clients understand it. And you might still be a little confused as to what your unique value is. And we're going to go over that in a minute. And just for right now, think about that, the value, and still concentrate on that and really hone in on what you're doing for the client. And so think about this in terms of results. So for instance, if you're writing something for a company that is selling a product, and you're writing sales copy, then the end goal is to get them more sales. So that's what you should be thinking about, not just providing writing. And if you can emphasize this value when you're pitching clients, then you'll have a much better chance of getting those jobs. So don't focus on the fact that you're this great writer. Tell the client what you're going to do for them. And this makes a big change. It's a simple change, but it creates big results, because that's what clients want to hear. Because like we said earlier, they don't really care about your writing, they care about the results. So your value, and you can think of it this way, it sort of breaks down into your product, which is your writing, your process, which just means your ability to do something instead of the client, so you simplify the process of them having to write all this copy or whatever it may be. And then your ability to save. Maybe you're saving the client time or money. Either way, you're saving them something. Time, energy, money, and capability, those are all things that fall under that category. And so there's value there as well. So one thing that we talk about in the course is that you should create voice and purpose statements for reference, and these will help you find more specifically what your value is. So we'll give you some examples. A voice statement is more or less a brief blurb about your writing voice, who you are as a writer. So your voice statement might be that you provide polished articles for professionals. So it's sort of what you do. And then your purpose statement is a more big picture end result goal. So and it might be to help local businesses get more sales. It might be to help people get more jobs if you're writing resumes, things of that nature. So the voice is a little more about you, and your purpose statement is a little more about your clients. So think of it that way, and especially focus on the purpose statement. Try to define your value in like 10 words or less, because if you can explain it simply, then your client will definitely understand it. So that's all stuff you want to be thinking about as we move through this webinar, because it's absolutely vital. If you're not thinking about the value you bring, and if you're not thinking about the results that your clients are going to get, then you're going to have a lot less of a chance at getting the jobs you want. So now we're going to talk about how to find the work. Now you're in the mindset of how to approach clients the right way and how to communicate with them. So you want to find these places to find work. And this is something we cover for a whole week in the course, week 4, because it is, a rather lengthy process. And this is also a very common question we get is, how do I find work? Where do I go? And as you might suspect, finding reliable sources for work is key. If you don't have any reliable sources and you're just looking sort of everywhere and it's a mishmash of job boards and all this stuff, then you're going to have a much less stable writing career. One thing I have to say at the outset is do not use content mills or freelancing platforms. We'll cover this a little bit later, so I'll go into depth into it then, but for right now, just try your best to think about using these alternative sources that we'll talk about instead of content mills or platforms, which most writers unfortunately use. Because they seem good, but they rob you of time and money. So what you want to do instead is to find websites where jobs are posted by individuals or companies. And the more narrow your search is, the better results you're going to get. So if you're just looking at literally every job posting you see, you're probably going to have a harder time pitching to those clients and really personalizing your pitches. But if you sort of narrow that and actually look a little less, you'll have better results because you'll be able to spend more time on your pitches and spend more time learning about what the client needs and selling yourself to them. And that seems a little contradictory, but it works. It really does, and that's what I've done, and it works great. And one particular source of jobs that I have to point out is Reddit. Now, Reddit can be really confusing if you're new to it, so I encourage you to just Google search for a beginner's guide to Reddit. There are several out there that really make it a lot easier to learn it. It's basically a social media forum sort of place, and lots of people post writing jobs there. So 2 places to look are the communities called For Hire and Hire a Writer. So if you wanted to go to one of these, you would type in reddit.com/r/forhire or Hire a Writer. And these are 2, they're called subreddits. So they're sort of like sub-communities that I've gotten my highest paying jobs from. I think some of the best work I've gotten, it's always been high quality work, and I've really enjoyed using it, and it's really simple to use once you get the hang of it. So I would encourage you to look there. It does seem intimidating, but if you stick it out, you'll get some great results. Like I said, I've gotten my highest paying jobs from these 2 sources, and it might seem unlikely, but I found that lots of companies that are smaller businesses and a lot of entrepreneurs post there, and it really helps you expand your network and get jobs that pay you more and they pay you faster, and the work is just overall way better than what you would find at a content mill or a freelancing platform. And I want to talk a little bit about my process for applying to jobs. So once I find a job I'm interested in, I kind of make sure a few things happen. The pay has to be clearly stated. So if the post doesn't state the pay, I'm automatically wary of the post, because usually when you dig a little deeper, you find that that person or company will often be paying not that much. So you want to make sure that it's stated out front and that it's not peanuts. You want to be compensated well for your work. you want to make sure the poster is clear about what they need, so there should be no surprises as to what you'll be doing for them. This is preferable, not necessary, but I prefer it if the poster is an individual, whether that's like an individual entrepreneur or someone who just works at a company, not a sales rep. So there will often be people who are commissioned as salespeople to post these and hire through a big process. But the whole point of using Reddit and other sites is to have the ability to talk directly with your client. So if the person is just representing an entire company, then you want to ideally avoid that. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it just makes it a lot simpler if you can talk directly to someone from the company, like the core company, or just an individual. And it helps also if the post offers some background as to what the person is doing, or what the company is doing, what they need, stuff like that. And then I message the poster with my value packed offer. So it's just a pitch that talks about the value I can bring for them. So for example, if the post is about writing a sales page, I want to make sure that I let them know that I can bring them more sales, and I can do that by X, Y, and Z. And again, you want to focus on value because that's sort of the language that clients speak. So you want to be able to be fluent in that language. And one trick I do is to move the conversation to email as soon as possible. And I think email is the easiest. You could also do like phone or Skype or something, but you want to move off the initial platform as soon as possible. And the reason for that is that I found that clients tend to be more committed once you kind of move off that platform and into something more dedicated to private correspondence. And here are some other work hotspots that I've also had success with. Two big ones that I really recommend are the Morning Coffee newsletter and the Online Writing Jobs newsletter, and you can find those at these links. They're both just email newsletters. You get them on a regular basis right in your inbox, and they have really high quality writing jobs that they have pulled from everywhere around the internet. So it's a nice curated list if you don't want to go out there and just spend hours searching, which you probably don't. There's the ProBlogger job board, but you want to be cautious about this one because it has declined in quality recently. I still recommend it because I feel that you can find good jobs on there if you look hard enough, but there are a lot of spammy, low quality jobs, so you'll have to filter those out. And you can find that at this link. Another site that I recommend being extra cautious on is freelancewritinggigs.com, and they scour Craigslist to find different writing jobs, and I found a couple off of this site, but Craigslist as a whole is very it's very chancy for finding jobs, and there's a lot of spam jobs, sometimes more spam than actual jobs. So you want to take your time and really sort of vet the post and make sure that they fit all the criteria that we talked about earlier. So once you've gotten some work done, you need to build a portfolio. And this is something we cover in day 5 of the course. So you really don't need anything fancy for this. A free online portfolio is going to do the trick perfectly. And you don't need like a huge portfolio. You ideally just want to put your best work in your portfolio. So some options for online portfolios include Contently, which is what I use. There's Journo Portfolio and Pressfolios, which are more geared towards journalists. So if you do a little more journalistic type writing, you might like one of those sites. And then Clippings.me is another one. So any of these will work fine. The important thing is that you just collect your work somewhere and that you can send a potential client a link to your portfolio and say, this is my work. That's all you need. And wrapping all of this up, we're going to send you a free bonus in your email, I believe tomorrow, and it's a case study on how one writer earned $30,000 a year as a part-time freelance writer, or continues to earn, I should say. And it's a great case study. Jacob, would you like to talk a bit about it? Because I think you are more involved in this.
Yeah, I'll just say really quickly that it's kind of she took an unusual path towards getting that income, and it is both very surprising and also very obvious. So hopefully that will pique your interest. It's a great case study, and she was generous to share her pitch template that she used to get her clients. So you'll be able to learn more tomorrow.
Yeah, I've taken a look at it, and it really is interesting. So if you're interested in making a lot of money as just doing part-time freelance writing, you definitely want to check this out. So that's wrapping up the client section of our webinar. So let's talk about getting articles published. And if you kind of fall into the creative writing fold, you might find this a little more appealing to you. First, we want to think about the pitch. This is something that we talk about during weeks 5 and 6 sporadically but consistently, because there's so much to cover, and we kind of hit a lot of different points about it in the course, because the pitch is so crucial to getting articles published. If your pitch flops, then you're not going to get the article. If you get the pitch and your article is sort of just all right, you can work to improve that. But the pitch, I think, is the most important part of getting articles published. So the first step you want to do is to find publications. And the best way to do that, I've found, is to just stay up to date in your niche. Follow the latest websites, or read the latest magazines. Overall, just being more informed about what's in your niche is going to help you when it comes time. Another simple way is just to do a Google search for publications in your niche. I recommend doing blogs, looking at blogs, and I think they're the best, and they're definitely the easiest, just because the barrier of entry is a lot lower than it is for a print magazine or even an online magazine, and you just generally will have a better chance of getting a blog article published than you would an article in some sort of more serialized magazine. If you want to get really technical, you can use what's called an RSS reader. Feedly is one example. These are basically feeds that help you keep track of the latest posts in your niche. You can follow different blogs and be notified when they post new content. So that's an option if you want to get really technical and in-depth with it. But you don't have to. The previous steps are more than enough. And then you have to come up with ideas. What I recommend is to write down 10 or more ideas a day, even if they're bad. And we have a whole section about this in the course. But basically, the idea is that you want to be constantly producing ideas and becoming something of an idea machine. And you'll find that you might write down a lot of bad ideas. In fact, most of your ideas will probably be bad. That's happened to me every single time that I've done this. But you'll find some diamonds in the rough that will eventually turn into articles that you can then successfully publish. And it's just a good practice to get into the habit of coming up with ideas and developing a system for yourself to think more about the type of content that you want to pitch. And you also want to use publications as sort of yardsticks to test your ideas. So whenever you write down an idea or maybe a headline, think about where you'd want to publish that, and then look at their content and think, would this fit on this blog or in this magazine or whatever? Because if you can see that headline or idea being published in the magazine or the blog or whatever it is, then that's a good sign that it will be a good contender to go forth and develop and then eventually pitch. One other thing you need to do is to carefully read the submission guidelines. This sounds really basic, but so many people don't do it. I would say close to maybe 70 or 80% of writers don't do this. And when I mean carefully read, I mean read the whole thing, front to back, because there are so many little details that publications are looking for. And if you don't follow the guidelines, most of the time, the blog or publication will just reject your pitch right on the spot. So it's really important that you give it a thorough read. You also want to read the blog itself thoroughly to get ideas, or whatever publication you're looking at, because you want to get a good idea of what kind of content this publication puts out, and you want to copy that content, that style of content, as closely as possible in order to have the best chance at getting published. Then you want to create a winning pitch. And once again, you need to think about benefits. So you can talk about your article, as much as you want. But in the end, it's really the editor thinking, how am I going to benefit from this? Is it that the editors, readers will love the article? Is that will it get the publication more readers? So you want to be thinking about what you can do for the publication and or the editor. And you want to keep it short and clear. I've looked at a lot of pitches from writers who, write extremely well, and their pitches are really long. And when it comes to pitches, that can be a sign of just pitch death, because editors are super busy and they just don't have time to read, like 3 chunky paragraphs of like 5 lines each. That's just way too long. So you want to keep it as short as possible. At the same time, don't be afraid to pitch your idea strongly and explain how the readers will benefit. What are the readers going to take away from this article? So you need to be thinking about value in terms of what the editor is going to get, and then also what the readers are going to get. And last but not least, you need to make sure to follow up. So 3 possibilities happen here. The first one is that you send in a pitch, it gets accepted, everyone's happy. The second one is that it gets rejected. If that happens, try to examine your pitch and see why it got rejected. And I actually recommend analyzing your pitches, whether they're accepted or rejected, because then you'll be able to learn what works and what doesn't, or you'll be able to try different things as you go on in your pitching career. But this third option is the trickiest one. You just don't hear back. What do? If this happens, you want to follow up, but you want to wait until you hear a concrete yes or no. But at the same time, you want to wait a little bit. So if you don't hear back in like 3 days, I wouldn't necessarily follow up at that point. I would recommend maybe like a week for a blog, and anywhere from 2 to 5 weeks for a bigger publication, depending on how busy and how large they are. But you do want to follow up until you hear a yes or a no. I would recommend doing maybe as much as 3 follow-ups, and if you don't hear a yes or no by then, you can usually assume that they're not interested, but you never know. They might email you back.
I just want to jump in. Sorry, I just want to jump in for a second and say that one of our students did that follow-up that Ian was talking about, and after not hearing back, she heard back from an editor of the LA Times, and her first publication ended up being in the LA Times. So this works for small publications as well as major newspapers such as the LA Times. So that's a good tip there.
Yeah, that's a great story. And yeah, that can happen if you just follow up, because the follow-up, I think, is just as important as the pitch, because as Jacob pointed out, if one writer got into the LA Times just by following up, imagine what you could do. And it's a repeatable process. This is all stuff that you can use over and over again, and it's a formula that works. All you have to do is put the effort into it, learn how to pitch well, and we actually have an entire course on pitching that's a month long, because it's such an in-depth topic. But if you put all this information into action, you'll see the results. And you might get into the LA Times, who knows? And like I said earlier, you want to analyze both your winning and your losing pitches, because you want to find what works and what doesn't, and see where any problems are. But you also want to look for things that both your successful and unsuccessful pitches share, and basically just pick them apart. Like I said, see what works, see what doesn't, and then adjust your pitches so that they become better over time. So now let's talk about some common mistakes that you might be making right now. And most freelancers do make these mistakes. I know I made almost all of them. The first one, and I talked about this a little bit earlier, is to not use content mills or freelancing platforms. Now this is, in my opinion, a huge, huge problem in the freelancing world, and we're actually going to be talking about that later on this year, hopefully. I actually had a writer email me the other day and say, I'm not getting paid for my writing, and I've been at it for a long time. And so I asked, well, where are you looking for jobs? And she said, I'm on Upwork and Freelancer, I thought. And right away, I knew that was the problem. And that's typical of many writers' experiences. You go on these sites and you get promised all this work, all this, this easy money and access to a wide pool of clients, and they make it seem a lot easier than it is. But in reality, you're often stuck either with no work or with work that you really don't want to do that doesn't pay well. So I recommend avoiding these at all costs. And I know how tempting it is. I've been there. I know how alluring the promise of short-term easy money is, and I know how tempting it is to want to sort of skimp on quality so that you can get some money in the bank. At the same time, I truly believe that it's just not worth it, because I've done work for a freelancing platform when I was at that sort of monetary low, and it only made me more miserable. So that's just my experience, but I've found that other writers have similar experiences. So just real quick, some examples of freelancing platforms are Upwork, Fiverr, People Per Hour, Guru, and Freelancer. And then some very popular content mills are things like BlogMut, OneSpace, TopTal. There's also TextBroker and Xeris. I think iWriter is still around. And these are all just places that I think you should avoid. And one of the reasons is because there's just such a huge commission, and you don't end up getting paid that much. You will make a little money, but they really undervalue you, they underpay you, and they steal time from you, because often you'll have a lot of problematic clients on these sites because they're lower quality sites that attract lower quality clients. And you'll be halted in your career, because if you use content mills or platforms, you'll find it much harder to progress. And when you want to cut the cord and go out and find jobs on your own, you suddenly are very lost and very confused. And so I think these just create more problems than they solve. And I've had a few writers ask, how do you tell if a site is a content mill? I think the best way to know is just to Google the name of whatever site you're on and see what other people are saying about it. But one sign is, super low rates. I'm talking 1 to 5 cents per word or less. Really demanding turnaround times. Often harsh editors, and no flexibility for writers. And usually there's some sort of hierarchy that you have to. There's like a ladder you have to climb in order to get paid more, and that's a pretty obvious sign of a content mill. And freelancing platforms, on the other hand, are more like Upwork and Fiverr, where you can you can choose who you work with, sort of, and you can personalize your services a little bit more, but they still take a huge commission. You still have to work with the types of clients that maybe you don't want to work with. And it's overall a waste of time. And I say that as someone who started out on a platform. One other thing that we get a lot is, I want to start my own blog. I want to become an expert in my niche, or I want to publish my writing, or whatever the case may be. And the hard truth is that blogging takes lots of time, energy, and money. I tried to do a blog, and it failed miserably because I didn't project any of this. I didn't expect that it would take so much time, that it would take so much energy, and that I would have to spend so much money on it. Because for blogging to seriously benefit you, you need to invest countless hours. It needs to be your full-time job. And this is why, the most popular blogs have teams and teams of people working around the clock to make them work and to make them, keep putting out content and sharing the content and all that stuff. And when it's just you, and when you're focusing mostly on getting paid for writing, blogging is just a huge, huge time suck. And it can really overwork you and burn you out. And I definitely experienced that. So my recommendation is that don't start a blog until you have about 4 or 5 long-term jobs and time to spare. If you have like one super high-paying job and you spend most of your time just doing nothing, at that point, I feel like you could start a blog and put everything you need into it. But for most freelance writers, blogging is just it's not the best idea. It will take more from you than it will give. And one last mistake: don't use an hourly rate. This is something we talk about in the course too, about how to set your rates and how to be competitive with them and still get paid well. But an hourly rate is easily the worst type of rate. The reason is they don't work well for freelance writing. They can cause you to lose money, and the reason for that is hourly rates incentivize people who take longer to work. So if you're a really efficient, productive writer and you have an hourly rate, you will lose to someone who is, lazier than you are. And it really incentivizes the wrong sort of thing, because it doesn't focus on the benefit, and it's a very sort of outdated, traditional way of doing things. So I recommend suggesting a per project rate instead. And you can find information on how to calculate that online or in our course if you're interested. And per word is decent, but I think project rates are the best choice to make because they're the most beneficial for you, and I think they're the easiest for clients to understand, because if you talk about a project rate, this is what the entire project will cost. And I think that's a very simple way of getting clients to understand the value you bring, and then why you're worth the price that you quote. Yeah, it's the most profitable for you. So think about that as you charge. And related to this, I'm going to be sharing with you a case study that I created on how I made $1 per word, and it's actually $1.50 per word. But you'll see that in the case study what happened and how I got that. And to get paid $1.50 per word, even $1 per word, I think $1 was my average. It's a big hallmark, and I think most writers would love to get paid that much, because you might be getting paid a cent per word, but opportunities like that exist. It wasn't an isolated incident, and I could easily repeat it and find another job that pays that much. So I'm going to be breaking down how I made that much and how you can as well. So now that we're sort of we've been talking about all the stuff that we offer in the course, I wanted to turn your attention to the membership a little bit. We have a monthly membership that gives you access to all 6 of our courses. We have a total of 103 training units and 16 modules, and that's just currently. So we add content on a regular basis. We're always adding new courses. We take ideas from our members, shape those in the courses. We offer one-on-one mentoring and support. We have unlimited email support. We have a discussion forum, live training, free ebooks, a bunch of benefits. And our members have enjoyed it so far, and this was our project, Jacob and I. We made this because we know how confusing it is to get started, and how much just crap there is out there that tells you the wrong thing. And one thing is that I've seen is that a lot of freelance writers tell other freelance writers to start on content mills. And I know, from experience and from talking with other writers who have made it through content mills, that that's just a waste of time. And so we've put every actionable tip that we can think of into this membership. And so we think you'll get a lot out of it. Jacob, do you want to say a word or two about it?
Yeah, I'll just say that Ian and I both really enjoy working with writers and helping you succeed with your freelance writing career. And that's part of why we created Writing Launch. And that's why we do these free presentations, that's why we do free presentations such as today, and also why we have our paid options, so that we can reach as many people as possible. But for those who want more in-depth training, we provide that as well. And with the membership program, you can choose to stay for a month, or you can choose to stay for 6 months. Most people stay between 1 and 6 months. It's really up to you and your goals as a writer, and how much progress you make, and the type of commitment and time you have to put into it. So I think that's all we need to say about that right now. We're not currently open for enrollment. We will be soon, so keep an eye out for that if you're interested. And right now, if anyone has any questions about freelance writing or today's presentation, go ahead and post your question in the comment, and we will answer. I know we already have one question. I'm sorry, I do not know how to pronounce your name, Saika Latif. You asked, how do you access expert info for a specific article or subject without repeating info widely available via a Google search, etc.? Ian, do you have an answer to that question?
Yeah, that's a really good question. My personal process is a sort of a mix of two things. The first is this idea of curation. You know, there are a lot of resources out there, but I found that for any given subject, the good information is really sort of piecemeal. And you might find, one tidbit of really good information in one article and another in another article, but there will rarely be truly comprehensive content on any given subject. So what I try to do is find the best parts of articles and put them together and then create a narrative around those that is just more in depth and that provides the best resource on that topic. And there's actually a name for this. It's called the skyscraper technique. If you Google it, you'll find a site called Backlinko that talks about it. And it's a really, really good technique to use if you want to have it like an easy formula for finding information or rather assembling that information. And something else that I do is I do a lot of research for anything that I'm writing. So you could often get away with a quick Google search, but if you really get into the in-depth tips and tricks of Google, you can find information that is not widely available, that not a lot of people know about. And we cover this in the course, how to use different commands in the Google search bar to get more fine-tuned results, different search operators. So if you learn all the different search operators and learn how they work, you'll be able to get a lot more sort of obscure and helpful information.
I'll add real quick that it really depends on your niche, but I love using Google Scholar to access scholarly papers and scholarly research, and that's often information that other people aren't using, and it's a source of really valuable, useful information that also positions you as an expert in your field if you're able to synthesize and understand and present scholarly research in a way that is accessible. That's something that can be quite valuable. So we have some more questions. Someone asked if there's a place for more information about Reddit. Is there a Reddit for Dummies tutorial out there?
Yeah, I think I mentioned this a little earlier, but if you just go to Google and type in beginner's guide to Reddit, there are several great ones out there. Just I think there should be 4 or 5 just on the first page of Google when you search for that. And the biggest thing is to just jump in and use it. If you go look at it right now, just type in reddit.com. It looks intimidating and it looks sort of like not the kind of place that you'd expect there to be writing jobs. But if you go to those 2 subreddits that I mentioned and just poke around, learn how to use the interface, there should be, I think there's some YouTube videos as well that cover the subject. So just a YouTube search would be great there. But I think jumping in and using it and getting acclimated to it is probably the hardest part, but the part that will get you to be able to use the platform most effectively.
We have a question from someone named Cindy, and she asked, how do you start networking from scratch? And this reminds me of a writer that I hired once, and how he started his networking is he just wrote an email that said, hey guys, I am a freelance writer now, and here's what I have to offer. And if you're interested, we can talk about it. And he sent that to his friends and his professional associates, and that's how he launched his career to good success. So I think in terms of networking, really you just have to start telling people that you're a freelance writer, and that is often what it takes to start you down that path and start getting clients, just talking about it with other people if you want to go the networking route. Ian, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
That's interesting that you mentioned that, because I've sort of had the opposite experience with networking, and I don't really think there's a right way or a wrong way. Like, you can certainly do that. I found that networking in an economy that's increasingly remote, it's not as necessary anymore, because in the very act of looking for jobs, you're doing what you want networking to accomplish. So like, networking is just sort of a middleman because the whole point of networking is to find more jobs. But with all these websites and stuff, you can just go to find more jobs, and so a network doesn't really become that necessary. With that said, I think it's important for you to keep in touch with any clients that you've had in the past, and always kind of go back to them and ask them if they need more work or something. And I think it's still valuable to have a network, but if you've been having trouble with using networking as your primary way of getting jobs, then maybe just try looking for jobs, plain and simple. But that's just my experience with networking, and it definitely will not hold true for everybody.
Jennifer Goebel asks, you mentioned hourly rate per project, and word rate. What's a reasonable range for a per word rate?
I would recommend at least 8 cents per word. And there's a lot of caveats that come up with this. The first is that if you're, I guess my first question would be, why do you want to charge per word? Because I think it's an okay way to charge, but I don't think it's the most efficient, and it's definitely not the most profitable. Because I think one thing is that clients have sort of become used to the per word concept, and so they're looking for a really small number, and that 8 cents sort of applies if you're a pretty new freelance writer. Like I said, I've made $1.50 per word. Ideally, you want to be in the range of anywhere from like 20 to 50 cents per word, and that seems like a lot, but it's all in how you pitch it. So if you have to do a per word rate, I would recommend, if you're just starting out, like, try 10 or even 15 cents per word, and then you can always negotiate down from that, because you don't want to be hitting like 5 cents per word or even a penny per word. Those are peanuts, but I would definitely re-emphasize the project rate idea. And you can do project rates for any sort of content. So an article, that's something you would charge per word for typically, but you can turn that entire article into a project and charge a fee for the whole article. So that would be my recommendation. But ideally, you want to be in that neighborhood of like 20 to 50 cents, just as a very general guideline.
We have another great question from, Heba Tala Hasni, and she asked, when you negotiate informally with clients outside of freelancing platforms, how do you guarantee getting paid?
Oh, okay, that's a great question. I recommend getting paid upfront if it's under about $500 in USD. And the reason is, if a client is not willing to put up the money, he or she is probably not willing to put up any money. And I've made that a policy that I don't allow anything else to happen. And this is talking about just clients. Now, publications will often pay, almost always, I think, will pay after you submit the article, and that's normal. You just have to make sure the publication is trustworthy and that they do pay writers. But when it's just you and a client, I always recommend getting paid up front if it's under like 500 USD or so. If it's above that, I would recommend doing some sort of like maybe half and half or milestone-based pricing. And we have information about that in the course, and you can do a Google search on those types of like sort of half and half or milestone pricing plans. But generally, you want to be paid up front because you're a service provider. And that's an interesting thing, because you wouldn't walk into, like a McDonald's or something and wait until, you ate the food to pay for your meal. You pay for it right away, and there's sort of that expected exchange of goods. And that's the same thing as writing. And some people, some clients think otherwise, but yeah, I would always recommend getting paid up front.
We have a question from Ray Blom, and he says, I am a storyteller from Louisiana. my comfortable niche as a writer is Louisiana folklore. Is that too narrow of a niche, or should I expand it to Francophile folklore, i.e. folklore from all French heritage countries? I think that's a really interesting question, and I would say that it largely depends on your goal as a writer in terms of where you want to take your career. Maybe you want to publish your writing in regional magazines in Louisiana, in which case I would say there's probably a number of publications throughout Louisiana that are local and want to publish your writing, but that might not take you in the direction you want. So, Ian, what do you think about that?
I think it also depends very largely on the market. If there's if there is a publication devoted entirely to Louisiana folklore, you could become the next their next writer. By the same token, if there's not a whole lot of publications that you could see your content being published in, then you may need to go a little broader. My recommendation is to start narrow and then go more general. And something else to think about is that with such an I think a unique topic as there could be lots of major publications who would be interested in covering that. So I would start at the smaller end of the funnel and go out. And at the same time, if there are publications that publish unique stuff like that, give those a look too.
We have a comment from someone named Melissa B, and she says if you want to have expert quotes for your articles, you can use the website HARO, Help a Reporter Out. That's something that it is quite valuable and useful. So you can Google it, HARO, HARO, for a way to get some more of that unique research that isn't easily found on a Google search. So we have a question from Mary Clark, actually a number of questions. So she has a question in terms of portfolios. So do you need permission to put an article someone else has published or you've written for one of your clients? Do you need permission to put that in your portfolio?
That will depend on a couple different things. It mostly boils down to the rights that you either keep or give over, and this has to do with mostly if we're talking about just clients here, it has to do with your contract, and we talk about that in the course, and you can Google that as well. But essentially, you want to make sure that in your contract, and you do need a contract every time you work with a client. Don't work without one. Always have them get a contract signed and get paid before you do any work. But going back to the question, you want to make sure that you at least make sure the client knows that you're going to keep the rights to share the article or content in your portfolio. Now, with publications, unless it's a very sort of niche or obscure publication that has really weird rules, you should be able to share it, because especially if it's an online publication, because the information is already out there, you're just linking to it, so you're not infringing upon any rights there. But yeah, if it's a client, you want to make sure you at least get the rights to share the content and show it to future potential clients.
And she also asked another great question, which is, how do you really show that your writing is value-based? How do you show that it has value for the potential client? Do you include client feedback in your portfolio, or what else do you include? How do you do that?
I think the most important thing is just to, kind of let your writing speak for itself, but also supplement it with your pitch. So when it comes down to it, your client is, going to look at your writing to judge how good of a writer you are. That's obvious, but you want to, put them in a certain frame of mind, and you want to be passionate about their goals. And I think that's a big thing, because most writers, they act like hired guns. They're just they want to do the job, get in, get out. But if you show that you care about the company or the client, whoever it is, and you want to help them achieve their goals, they'll be much more likely to work with you. I think stuff like testimonials and feedback is great if you have it. If you don't, that's okay too. And if you have any results, like if you can say something like, my sales page made $2,000 for this company, then you have sort of like a little case study on your hands, and that's excellent. But overall, if it's all in your pitch and how you present yourself, and and show that you're passionate about helping the client achieve their goals, and that you can do that because of your writing. And that has worked for me incredibly well, and that's usually what I will tell other freelance writers who ask that question.
Ian, when you were doing your presentation and talking about pitches, I thought of a sort of an analogy. Is oftentimes, or on occasion, I'll ask my wife out on a date, and it's kind of a similar thing. Is I'm not just asking her out on a date because I want to go out to a restaurant. I want to make her happy and bring her joy. So I'm not thinking about myself and what I'm doing. I'm thinking about her and what will make her happy. And it's kind of the same when you're pitching a client. You want to think about what's going to make them happy. And the same with asking someone out on a date. It's not about you if you're going to be giving them a good time. It's about them and how you will be providing value to them. Hopefully that helps add a different perspective. Sue Ferris-Liskowski asks, can you use an article more than once in different magazines?
That usually depends on the magazine itself. I would normally say no. I think I understand that it's tempting to want to reuse content, but and this is something I will tell writers all the time. One of the most important concepts, if you want to be a successful freelance writer, is the idea of customization. So if you try to reuse content a lot, and if you use like boilerplate templates for pitches and stuff like that, you're not going to get very far because today's economy is so busy. There are millions of other freelance writers that are vying for the same types of jobs that you are. So you need to stand out. And one of the best ways to do that is to be as customized as possible. So you want to personalize your content for each magazine. You want to customize your pitch for a specific editor at the specific magazine. You want to, customize your client pitches for that specific client or company or whatever, and that will help you go really, really far. That's what I've done, and it served me really, really well.
Rebecca Michael asks, hi, lately I've seen a lot of job posts where they make you write a sample or produce a test paragraph, etc. Some of them are a lot of work sometimes. What do you think of these kinds of job posts?
I would say anything more than a sample paragraph of like 2 to 3 lines is you shouldn't do anything more than that. I actually have a story about this. There was one time when I was a little, well, actually I have 2 stories that will sort of illustrate either side of this. There was a time when I was a little low on jobs, low on money, and so I was looking at different job postings, and I found this particular one on the Pro Blogger job board. And like I said, I still recommend that, but this is sort of an example of how it can be bad. I found this posting that looked pretty good. There was it seemed like the posting was good from an individual, but it required 2 sample articles. And so, I spent maybe, 3 or 4 days writing them because they were really, it was content that I was not familiar with. And so I had to do a lot of research and put a lot of effort into it. And I submitted the 2 articles, never heard back from the person again. The email address bounced after like a week. On the bright side, I haven't seen those articles anywhere online, but I did waste a lot of time that I could have been using to search for other jobs. On the other hand, once I did a test paragraph that was like maybe 2 or 3 lines for a product description, and I got that job, and it made me hundreds of dollars. So you really have to be discerning about the type of stuff. But generally, when it comes to sample articles, 90% of the time, that's a company trying to get free work out of you. Your portfolio and past work should speak for itself, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would say if they're asking you to work for free, it kind of shows what they think of you and how they value you as a writer. So that's a big red flag. If they're asking for just a couple minutes of work, that's that can be considered respectful. And you want to work with clients who are going to respect you and your time. Um, I believe we've covered most of the questions. Oh, so yeah, Mary Clark, she did have another question is, so she has a good body of writing on diverse topics. So can she use some of them for a portfolio if she changes it, if she changes the writing a little bit, even if she doesn't exactly have permission? Like, how do you go about using writing samples when you don't have permission to share the full article?
That's interesting. I think in that case, it's probably, at least I would recommend to play it more safe than sorry and just not change it up or share it. And this sort of brings up another topic, which is the idea of choosing a niche, because if you have, content all over the place, you want to be you don't really want to be a jack of all trades necessarily. You want to be, a master of one or two. And so what I would recommend is once you find the niche that you want to settle in and really write in, and I think that's what the most successful writers really do. Try to find some blogs that accept, guest posts. And that's one thing I always talk about. That's the easiest way to get started. We'll probably talk about that more in future presentations or something. But that's the easiest way to get started, and ensures that your content is getting out there, that you have permission to share it. And so you might have to start over in a little way, but alternatively, I would contact the publications you wrote for and just ask for permission, because I think most places will be glad to, allow you to just share it in your portfolio, because it's not as if you're republishing the work. You're just, linking to it or showing your potential clients, hey, I wrote this. So those would be the two things I would suggest.
We have another question from Olivia. She asks, what is the best way to follow up with an editor when you haven't heard back? Do you repitch, or would that be too redundant? And I would say, because I am an editor and I get, this happens sometimes, I won't have time to respond to a submission sometimes for weeks. And usually what I appreciate is a one-sentence email that includes the original pitch forwarded. And so someone will send me an email that says, I'm just writing to see if you've had a chance to take a look at this. And then they'll say thank you. And then below that will be their original pitch as a forward. And that's usually what I appreciate getting as an editor. Ian, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
I couldn't have said it any better. That's what's worked for me. That's what I've used to get the most results. And I think, as you said, that's what editors appreciate, because, one thing to keep in mind is that most editors are incredibly busy, and they have, inboxes with hundreds and hundreds of unread emails, and they just can't get to all of them. So the more detail and meaning you can pack into fewer words, the better. So I completely agree.
I would add that the primary thing you want to think about is that editors are busy. And so the worst thing you can do is send a bunch of follow-ups. I recently got a follow-up email to a pitch 12 minutes after the original pitch was sent. And then 20 minutes later, I got another follow-up, and the person was a little angry, asking why I hadn't responded yet. And that basically ruined any chance of me ever wanting to work with that writer. But even like less extreme, the next day or the day after, you need to give the editor time to respond. And it's not necessarily easy to figure out how much time you should wait. A minimum of a week. A couple weeks is fair too. So be patient and take your time. And really, if you're finding that you really want to hear back and you're really anxious to hear back from an editor and it's just starting to get to you, the very best thing you can do is actually to send a pitch to a completely different publication, and then send a pitch to another completely different publication, and just get into the habit of pitching. And then the idea of waiting becomes very different, because you're no longer waiting for the one person. You're waiting on a dozen different possible publications. And so it becomes just a natural part of your day-to-day life, is waiting for responses and getting back to them, and just the regular interaction is different when it's not all writing on one or two pitches.
Yeah, that's so true. And in addition to that, if if you're waiting sort of on a pitch by pitch basis, you will spend a lot of time waiting and almost no time pitching. And something that we talk about in our pitching course is that you just have to do it a lot if you want to get good at it. And if you want to get published in a lot of places, you have to get used to constantly pitching and constantly coming up with different ideas and not putting all your eggs in one basket.
Okay, we're just about out of time, so we'll get to the last few questions, and then we'll be ending for the day. Someone asked about the bonuses mentioned in the webinar. You'll be getting the first bonus tomorrow, and the second bonus on Wednesday, the next day. So those are not available yet, but we will be sending them out over the next 2 days, those two bonuses. So back to the questions. When I'm submitting, someone named Jane asked, when I'm submitting to publications, they often ask for my website or Facebook page. Would a portfolio be better, or do I need these others?
I think a portfolio would work fine. I personally don't have either a Facebook account or a website. I did have a website, but I don't anymore. And I found that a portfolio just works best. I think usually if publications are asking for that, if they want to see your work, then send them to your portfolio. But sometimes they'll ask for that for information in your author bio. And in that case, you could just say oh, I don't have a website or a Facebook, so you can just print a regular bio without a link. But I think we have a course on building a writer's website for yourself, and I do think that it can be incredibly valuable. If you don't have one at the moment, that's fine. But if you want to optimize your chances for getting jobs and really showing off to clients, then it could be a worthwhile investment. So that's something you have to decide for yourself.
Hebatala Hosni asked about, is there a reliable resource to get info about various writing job rates? And there is actually a really neat website called Who Pays Writers. And if you do a Google search for Who Pays Writers, you'll get real reports of actual payment rates for hundreds of different publications in a wide variety of niche. Obviously, it doesn't include every publication in the world, but it often gives you an idea of how much various publications pay for their writing, and also how much time it takes to get paid from these different publications. So that is one source for actual real payment rates. Who Pays Writers? Just Google it, and that'll come up, and it's really an interesting resource. Cindy Olivas asked, how long should your writing samples be?
That will greatly depend on the niche you're in, I think, because, for example, I do a lot of writing in marketing and sales and stuff like that. So I prefer having longer form samples. But if you're just writing like blog posts or something, then shorter is fine. It's less about quantity and more about quality, I would say. And actually, real quick, I want to go back to the last question and just add a couple of things real quick. On finding information about rates, the first thing I would say is that, Google the publication name and see if any other writers are talking about it. And the second thing I'll say is that at the core, your rate should be determined on how much you need to live and pay your bills and get food and all that. So that should be sort of the first step you take, and then sort of look at the market and see what people are paying. But at the same time, don't be afraid to charge a lot, because if you back it up with value, you will get those jobs. So I just wanted to add that in real quick.
I think that there was one more question I wanted. I'm just trying to find what. So,
and if you have any questions, or if we missed your question or anything like that, email us at support@writinglaunch.com, and one of us will personally answer your question if you still have any.
Chris asked, as a contributing writer to a nationally recognized website, can I, without committing any infractions, feel free to submit the same article to other similar websites? And that is something that should be pretty straightforward to answer. If you have a contract with that publication, it should say clearly what you're allowed to do with the writing, whether you own it or whether they own the writing. And if you don't have a contract, then you do own the rights. However, you do want to respect your relationship with that publisher, so that's also something to keep in mind. And maybe you would want to ask the editor what is the best choice for you to do, and whether or not you would be free to publish your writing elsewhere if it's been published by them before. Ian, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I would just say I think this is the second question we've gotten on like reusing content, and I'll just finish up by saying two things. The first is that I understand how tempting it is to want to reuse content. You know, as a purely business-minded practice, it makes sense to reuse something and get more money out of something you've already done. It's sort of this idea of passive income, like if you sell an ebook or something. But in terms of article publishing, I don't think in maybe like 95% of cases, I would say it's just not feasible and or practical. And you know, there's so much that goes into that, but I think it's, like I said earlier, customization is one of the biggest keys to making it as a freelance writer. And two, if you are looking at reusing content more than once, you have to think about how that's going to affect your performance in Google, because Google will penalize sites with duplicate content, and generally that's why you don't see two sites with the same article. So there's a lot of like in-depth technical stuff that goes into that. But the more unique content you produce, the better. So that's my sort of statement for that.
Okay, so that's all the time we have today. Thank you everyone for being here, and watch your email, because tomorrow we're going to be sending you that first bonus, which is a case study, how one writer earns $30,000 a year as a part-time freelance writer. And then the next day, we were going to be sending another case study from Ian about how he earned $1.50 per word on a writing project. And I think you'll find both of these case studies very interesting. Thank you for your time. Ian, I don't know if you have any closing words.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, thank you for being here. I hope that you got a lot out of it. If you have any questions, you can email us at support@writinglaunch.com. Jacob or I will personally respond. And, we'll be sending out this link again so you can replay this and go through it, really think about it as a system that you can use over and over again. And I encourage you to use this information, because I think you'll get really good results out of it. So yeah, thank you for watching, and we hope you have a great day.